time being, it's impossible for me to take my family back to the UK safely. Well, for a start, the only time that I've come back to the UK is...
The decision Harry feared has finally arrived, and this time there is no temporary suspension, no carefully worded compromise, and no path back through a private palace door. King Charles has authorized the final removal of Harry's remaining royal titles, formally severing the Sussex connection from active royal status. What had survived years of rupture has now been cut away in a single decisive act, and the emotional consequences begin immediately. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles knew the document in front of him would change more than protocol. A senior palace official placed the completed royal order before him, and the king read the final paragraph twice before signing. A royal order, in plain terms, is a formal instruction issued under the monarch's authority to settle an official matter. This one removed Harry's remaining titles and ended the Sussex's residual official royal standing. When the pen touched the paper, the uncertainty that had survived years of conflict disappeared. The silence afterward carried its own weight. Charles left the pen beside the file and remained seated, saying nothing. The decision gave the monarchy clarity, because Harry would no longer occupy a blurred space between private family member and royal representative. It also imposed a permanent boundary between the Crown's working structure and the Sussex household. Yet that certainty came at a cost. The king understood that he had not simply changed how his son would be addressed. He had changed how history would describe their separation. Harry felt the blow thousands of miles away. When confirmation reached him in California, he read the wording once, then again, searching for the part that might leave room for reversal. There was none. His face tightened as the meaning settled in. The titles he had once assumed would remain attached to his identity had been removed through his father's authorization, and the loss felt less like an administrative correction than a door being locked from the other side. The finality had been planned. Charles had held the order back until a clause was added, making clear that no automatic restoration would follow future talks, visits, or reconciliation. William had already been told the document was complete, and even he was unsettled by how absolute the language had become. The future king did not challenge it. That silence mattered. The titles were gone in minutes, but the deeper wound was only beginning to open. Harry now had to face the father who signed the order, the brother who accepted it, and the question of why neither man chose to stop it. Behind the royal language are three men bound by blood and separated by choices they can no longer reverse. Charles has protected the crown at the cost of another piece of his relationship with Harry. William has watched brotherhood turn into institutional distance. And Harry, stripped of the final symbols connecting him to his old life, must confront a devastating possibility. This is no longer a family quarrel waiting to cool. It is separation made official. Charles felt that conflict more sharply than anyone. In a quiet conversation with a trusted aide, the king asked only whether the wording left any ambiguity. The answer came quickly: none. As sovereign, meaning the monarch acting in his official constitutional role, rather than simply as a private father, he had chosen certainty, where years of personal hesitation had once remained. He nodded slowly, but there was no sense of victory. The decision protected the institution, while cutting deeper into a relationship he had never truly stopped wanting to repair. William understood why that certainty mattered. Every unresolved Sussex dispute could eventually become part of his own reign, and the future king knew that uncertainty, inherited from one monarch, rarely becomes easier for the next. He had watched private tensions repeatedly spill into public arguments, forcing the palace to explain where Harry stood and what authority he still carried. Ending that confusion protected the crown's future, but it also meant accepting that his younger brother would now stand permanently outside the structure they had once shared. Harry could not treat the notification as a simple change of style. He placed it on a table, walked away, then returned and read it again. The loss reached back into childhood, because those titles had been woven into how the world identified him long before he understood their meaning. Now the same family that had given him that identity had formally withdrawn it, and the finality felt almost like being edited out of a life he had once assumed could never disappear. Charles almost broke the silence. He reached toward a phone after learning that Harry had received the order, then stopped before making the call. The king quietly asked that no private conversation be arranged yet. He feared that speaking too soon would turn emotion into another negotiation, and the monarch had already decided there could be no reopening of the issue. That hesitation revealed the painful divide inside him. The father wanted contact, while the sovereign believed contact might weaken the clarity he had just created. William had made his own choice earlier. In a private exchange with Charles, the prince said the monarchy could not keep carrying an unresolved status indefinitely. He did not celebrate what that meant for Harry, but he refused to lobby for reversal. The decisive issue was no longer criticism or embarrassment. It was trust. Charles had finally concluded that the institution could not depend on a relationship where confidence itself had become uncertain. For years, the palace had tolerated fracture without declaring the relationship finished. But one private encounter finally convinced Charles that keeping the door half open was more dangerous than closing it completely. And that moment was about to reveal why hesitation ended. Every royal rupture has a moment people later identify as the instant everything changed. For Charles, it came during a private Windsor meeting meant to reduce tensions, not destroy what remained of the relationship. Harry arrived, expecting conversation. The king arrived, hoping for clarity. But one exchange transformed the atmosphere completely, leaving Charles convinced that their disagreement was no longer merely emotional. It had become an institutional problem that demanded a final answer. Harry entered that meeting believing there was still room to define a workable future. The discussion centered on royal events, family access, and the continuing use of distinctions connected to the crown, while he remained outside active service. Active royal service simply means carrying out official duties on behalf of the monarchy. That distinction mattered, because palace advisors had warned that Harry's position kept creating confusion over whether future appearances or statements might still be seen as carrying royal authority. Charles wanted one point settled above everything else. He asked Harry whether future private family discussions could remain completely confidential, without later becoming part of interviews, memoirs, recorded conversations, or public defenses. The question was direct, but the pressure behind it was enormous. The king believed private trust was the foundation of any future relationship. Harry believed silence could leave him unable to answer accusations or defend himself if another dispute became public. Harry refused to give the absolute promise his father wanted. He explained that he could not surrender the right to speak if he believed his position was being misrepresented. Charles listened without interrupting. Then the king removed his glasses, folded them carefully, and told his son that trust could not operate only when circumstances were convenient. Harry immediately felt the temperature of the conversation change. The disappointment he had seen before was gone. In its place was something far more dangerous: decision. Charles ended the discussion earlier than expected. He called an advisor into the room and asked for an existing titles memorandum to be returned for formal review. A memorandum is simply an internal document setting out options, arguments, and possible consequences before a major decision is made. Harry understood exactly what that request meant. The meeting was no longer about repairing the relationship. His father had shifted into the role of monarch, and the unresolved question of status had suddenly become active again. William heard about the exchange later, in a private conversation with Charles. The prince listened in silence, as his father described Harry's refusal to give an unconditional assurance. When the king finished, William said an institution could not function if every private conversation carried the possibility of future exposure. That sentence hardened what had already begun. Harry soon learned that the Windsor meeting had become the trigger. His anger moved immediately toward William, because now he believed his brother had helped turn one painful family disagreement into permanent policy. The private meeting had reopened the file, but the next confrontation would be far more personal. Years of grievance finally narrow into one room, two brothers, and a sentence neither can take back. Harry believes William stood beside their father, while the final remnants of his royal identity were erased. William believes Harry repeatedly demanded trust, while reserving the right to break it. There are no cameras, no aides positioned between them, and no ceremonial language left to hide behind. What follows is not merely an argument. It is the collapse of their last shared assumptions. Harry enters the conversation, carrying anger that has already been sharpened by what happened at Windsor. He wants to know whether his brother tried to stop the order before it reached Charles. William does not hide behind palace language. The prince tells him plainly that the final authority belonged to their father as sovereign, meaning Charles acted in his official role as monarch. But he also admits he did not oppose the outcome. That answer lands harder than denial. Harry had prepared himself for excuses. He had not prepared himself for agreement. Harry finally says the words that have been building inside him. "You could have stopped this." William pauses, shifts a chair slightly away from the table, and answers without raising his voice. Protecting uncertainty, he says, was never the same as protecting his brother. The future king argues that years of blurred boundaries had damaged trust inside the family and created confusion outside it. Every unresolved dispute forced the monarchy to explain again where Harry stood, what he represented, and whether his words carried any connection to the crown. Harry reaches for something deeper than titles. He reminds William of the promises they once made after Diana's death, when both brothers believed that whatever happened around them, they would protect each other. The accusation changes William's tone immediately. He does not dismiss the memory. He tells Harry that their mother's death bound them together, but shared grief cannot become permanent protection from every consequence that follows later choices. For a moment, neither man seems angry. They simply look exhausted. William then confirms what Harry feared. He had understood the implications of the final wording before Charles signed it. He had time to object, and he chose not to. The reason is not revenge. The prince says the unresolved Sussex position would eventually become a problem inherited by his own reign, leaving him to settle the same conflict under even greater pressure. He could not allow the next monarchy to begin with an old fracture still open. Harry leaves shaken because the confrontation gives him clarity he did not want. William would not save him, but neither had he created the order. The power still rested with Charles, and that realization redirects everything. If there was one final question left to answer, it belonged to the father, whose signature had turned years of family conflict into permanent policy. The most dramatic royal decisions are often born not in shouting matches, but in silence around a table. Charles had resisted absolute separation because every formal step against Harry also carried the weight of a father acting against his own child. Yet by the time the final papers reached him, the debate had changed. The question was no longer whether the action would hurt. Everyone knew it would. The question was whether refusing to act would hurt the monarchy more. Charles understood that no advisor could carry the final responsibility for him. William could offer his view, palace officials could explain the consequences, and lawyers could shape the language. But the king alone had to approve the decision. The crown, meaning the monarchy acting as an institution rather than simply the royal family as private relatives, needed a clear answer about Harry's status. Keeping titles attached to someone permanently outside active royal service risked preserving the impression of official closeness where none remained. Charles returned to the memorandum alone. The document laid out the arguments, risks, and consequences of each possible course, but his attention drifted toward a family photograph near the desk. For several seconds, the king looked at the image of his sons together. Then, he turned it face down. There was no anger in the gesture. He simply could not keep reading while being reminded of the years before duty. Resentment and public conflict had pushed William and Harry so far apart. Camilla noticed the exhaustion later. She found Charles unusually quiet and waited until he spoke first. The king admitted that ending the uncertainty as monarch did nothing to ease what he felt as a father. He could make the institution stronger and still feel personally diminished by the same decision. The queen consort did not argue for reversal or offer easy comfort. She stayed beside him, allowing the silence to say what neither of them could soften. Charles then made the order even more final. He requested language stating that reconciliation, private visits, or changes in public mood would not automatically restore what had been removed. The monarch wanted any future relationship with Harry separated from the question of royal status. That safeguard mattered, because without it, every family meeting could immediately restart speculation about titles and official return. Charles also refused to turn the decision into humiliation. When the possibility of a larger public declaration was raised, the king rejected it. He wanted certainty, not spectacle. Harry would lose official standing, but his father would not publicly celebrate the loss. The restraint could not contain the consequences for long. Once the decision moved beyond palace walls, Harry began discovering that the titles had been connected to far more than words beside his name, and the new reality was about to arrive all at once. There is a difference between reading that something has ended and living the first hour after it ends. Harry learns that difference immediately. The palace order begins reshaping how correspondence is addressed, how future royal invitations are framed, and how officials describe his relationship to the crown. Small details suddenly carry enormous emotional force. A life once surrounded by hereditary certainty has become defined by separation. And for the first time, Harry cannot tell himself the rupture is temporary. Harry notices the change first in something almost painfully ordinary. An updated formal communication arrives using only the name and styling now recognized by the palace, without the royal distinctions he had carried before. Official styling simply means the formal titles and forms of address used in royal correspondence and ceremonial records. He reads the heading twice, holds the page for several seconds, then pushes it away. The absence of a few words suddenly says more than the entire document beneath them. The consequences keep coming. Harry remains Charles's son and William's brother, but blood no longer creates automatic institutional access. Future invitations to royal events will depend on personal decisions rather than official rank, and access to certain residences, ceremonies, or arrangements will require direct approval. That difference matters because it ends the assumption that family membership alone guarantees a place within the working structure of the monarchy. What once came with birth must now come by invitation. Meghan watches the anger disappear into something quieter. She sees Harry withdraw rather than explode, and she tells him that a title cannot decide who he is. He answers that the pain is not about vanity. It is about realizing that the family he grew up inside has formally rewritten where he belongs. Meghan stays close, but even her reassurance cannot change the fact that the new boundary has been drawn by his own father. Harry receives another message before the day is over. Charles sends a short private note, making one distinction painfully clear. His affection for his son remains, but the decision of the monarch will not change. The king offers no apology, no hidden promise, and no suggestion that time will automatically restore what has been removed. The words are personal, but the boundary is firm. Harry reads that note differently from the official order. Instead of reaching for another public response, he makes an unexpected choice. He asks for one private conversation with Charles, without advisors, lawyers, palace officials, or William between them. For the first time, he no longer wants to argue about titles. The machinery has done its work. Now only the father and the son remain, and their next conversation will decide whether losing the crown also means losing each other. Remove the titles, the advisors, the statements, and the years of public warfare, and two people remain, a father and a son who still remember what existed before everything became a constitutional argument. Harry's final private conversation with Charles does not restore what has been lost. It does something more painful. It forces both men to acknowledge that affection can survive even when trust, duty, and shared institutional life do not. There will be no miracle reconciliation here, only truth. Charles agrees to meet without senior aides, briefing papers, or anyone waiting to shape the words afterward. Harry arrives knowing there will be no formal appeal on the table. An appeal, in this setting, would mean an internal attempt to challenge or reverse the decision already made by the monarch. But the king removes that possibility immediately. The order will stand. He says it calmly, because neither man can reach the truth underneath the conflict, if the conversation becomes another negotiation about titles. Harry asks the question he has been carrying since the notification arrived. Did his father truly believe removing the titles was worth losing even more of his son? Charles does not answer quickly. The king tells him that love never disappeared, but love could no longer be used as a reason to delay a decision he believed the monarchy needed. Harry hears the distinction clearly. His father is not claiming the choice was painless. He is saying the pain was no longer enough to stop it. Harry finally admits what hurts most. Public humiliation can fade, headlines can move on, and arguments about status can become old history. But knowing Charles reached a point where hope for institutional reconciliation no longer prevented action feels different. The son realizes his father had once been willing to wait for change. Now the king had stopped waiting. Charles then gives him the only opening left. The royal door, he says, is closed. But the family door does not have to remain locked. Harry can rebuild something personal without rebuilding something official. That distinction matters because it separates affection from rank for the first time. A future visit would not mean restoration. A private conversation would not mean a return to royal duty. Father and son could exist without pretending the old arrangement was coming back. Harry sits with that reality before answering. Then he tells Charles he will not pursue another internal attempt to reverse the order. It is not forgiveness, and it is not surrender. It is acceptance. The choice changes everything that follows. The palace expects retaliation. The public expects another war. The media prepares for a new explosion. Instead, Harry says nothing, and the silence becomes almost as powerful as the decision itself. By morning, a private family wound has become a national image. Screens carry the announcement. Newspapers compress years of conflict into brutal headlines, and crowds outside royal gates debate whether the king has shown strength or surrendered hope. Yet the most striking part of the reaction is not the noise. It is the realization that something familiar has disappeared overnight. The endless uncertainty surrounding Harry's formal place inside the monarchy has finally been replaced by a clear answer. The palace keeps its response brief. The official communication states that Charles has approved the removal, and that future royal references will reflect Harry's changed status. An official communication, in this context, is the formal wording released by the royal household to establish the institution's position without adding personal argument. There is no attack, no emotional accusation, and no attempt to humiliate him. William follows the same discipline. The prince avoids any language of victory, while the king continues with scheduled duties, as though the matter has moved from conflict into settled fact. Harry cannot escape the reaction. He watches broadcasters repeat the decision, sees his old identity reduced to headlines, and feels anger rise before something unexpected follows it. Relief. For years, uncertainty had kept him caught between belonging and separation. Now that uncertainty is gone, the loss is painful, but the answer is unmistakable. Meghan notices the difference in him and understands that his silence is no longer simply shock. Harry is beginning to accept that the battle he kept expecting to resume has actually ended. Charles sees the cost from the other side. An aide places the morning press summary before him, filled with headlines, commentary, and public reaction. The king scans several pages, closes the folder, and asks for it to be removed. He will not reconsider the decision, but he refuses to treat the coverage as proof of victory. The monarchy has gained clarity. A father has still lost something. Outside Buckingham Palace, the story becomes impossible to ignore. A crowd gathers near the gates, while a newspaper vendor raises a front page carrying 3 stark words: Sussex era ends. Television crews describe the moment as the clearest institutional break between Harry and the crown since he left working royal life. Some voices call it necessary, others call it tragic. But almost everyone understands the same thing. This time, there is no gray area left. The greater surprise comes from California. Broadcasters wait for an angry statement, a recorded response, or another public challenge. Nothing arrives. Harry keeps the promise implied by his private conversation with Charles and does not reopen the fight. By sunset, Britain has heard the decision, Harry has absorbed it, and Charles has refused to retreat. Only one judgment remains now: what everyone lost, what the monarchy believes it gained, and whether this ending was victory at all. In the end, there is no dramatic reversal, no hidden clause, and no last-minute rescue. Harry's remaining royal titles are gone, Charles's order stands, and the Sussex chapter as an official extension of the monarchy is finished. But the deepest consequence cannot be measured through protocol. A father has chosen the crown where compromise once stood. A son has lost the identity he carried from birth. And a brother has accepted that some bonds survive only after expectations disappear. Harry now stands outside the official royal structure, with no provisional wording, no pending review, and no quiet expectation that time will restore what has been removed. Official royal structure means the formal system of duties, titles, access, and representation connected to the crown. That separation matters because the uncertainty is finally gone. He remains Charles's son and William's brother, but blood no longer gives him automatic institutional standing. The family relationship survives. The royal role does not. Charles feels the cost after the decision has already settled into fact. Once his final duties are finished, the king returns briefly to the signed order that ended the argument. He does not reopen the file or reread the clauses. Instead, he closes the folder and places it away. The gesture carries no triumph. The monarch has achieved the clarity he believed the crown needed, but the father inside him understands that leadership has demanded something deeply personal in return. Harry reaches his own moment of acceptance far from the palace. He takes the official notification that had remained on the table and finally puts it aside. The sadness does not disappear, but the waiting does. He can no longer build his future around the belief that another meeting, another appeal, or another change in mood will restore the identity he once carried. For the first time, loss and certainty arrive together. William also emerges from the conflict changed. The prince did not defeat his brother or take something for himself. He accepted a boundary because he believed the next reign could not inherit an unresolved battle from the current one. That decision may protect the monarchy he expects to lead, But it also leaves a family wound that no constitutional clarity can erase. Charles has ultimately separated two things that years of conflict kept tangled together: family affection and royal privilege. Reconciliation may still exist privately, but status will no longer be the price of peace. Harry leaves with fewer titles but complete clarity. The king keeps the authority of the crown while carrying the grief of what his signature cost. William inherits greater certainty and a permanent reminder of what certainty demanded. There is nowhere else for this decision to go. The titles are removed, the institutional separation is complete, and what remains between Charles, William, and Harry must now survive without the protection or the burden of royal status. The crown moves forward. Harry begins a life no longer defined by unfinished royal business, and the Sussex royal era ends not with victory, but with acceptance. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.